Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Natcat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to wrap up my September reading month. September was, I don't want to call it the bad month, but I feel like we are on a one-way road to a mid-reading year again, and I don't really know how to get out of this. I don't want to call it a full-blown slump, but this mediocre reading life that I'm living. I feel like I definitely get a few books that I definitely love, but we've had a lot more books that I could easily forget that I read. We don't have a lot of standouts. We don't have a lot of new all-time favorites, and I don't really know how to change up my reading habits so that I get more 5 stars, because I'm tired of having like maybe 1 or 2 5 stars a month, or like last month I didn't even have a single 5 star. So we'll see. We're approaching the end of the year. We'll take a look at my reading habits and what I need to change to like really be reading banger after banger after banger, because that is what we want. I follow people who give so many 5 stars to the book they're reading, and I was like, I want to be that person. But that being said, we are here to look at specifically the month of September. For the month of September, I did play my TBR game. If you are new to my channel, I will go ahead and link my TBR playlist up above if you want to go ahead and watch those. It is a lot of fun. I love playing my TBR game, and I've made some changes recently where I am rolling 10 times instead of 5, so I have a bigger selection of books to choose from. Now, just because I'm rolling more does not mean I'm reading more. In fact, here are all the books that I was supposed to read this month, and the books with the little pieces of pie on them are the ones that I have actually read. I did read some books that were not on my TBR, but that being said, before we get into the reviews, we are gonna go over some general stats for the month, and then if you're new here, I go ahead and review my books from lowest rated to highest rated. So I ended up finishing a total of 6 books this month. Definitely lower than what I would like. I would say, if I'm being realistic, that I like the idea of being around 8 to 9 books a month. So this is definitely on the lower side. I will say that I DNF'd a total of 3 books this month, and I also started an additional 3 books that are currently sitting on my currently reading list. So there's definitely a lot of audiobook hours and pages that I was reading that are not included in these stats, because this only includes the books that I actually finished. That being said, when it comes to page count, I finished 1,630 pages this month, and audiobook hour wise, I only finished 1 audiobook, and that put me at 8.72 hours of audiobook listening. On the bright side, if we look at the average rating, it was a 4.25. I love to be above a 4-star average. The lowest rating I gave this month was a 3.5, which we do love to see, though I did also only give 1 5-star read. Again, what is it with me only getting like 1 5-star read? Come on, we need more. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the DNFs. So this month I DNF'd 1 physical book and 2 audiobooks. The physical book that I DNF'd, I actually didn't read this month. It is one that has been sitting on my currently reading list for a while, and I officially decided to DNF this book. It has been hanging over my head like an anvil, and I have decided to step out from under that and DNF Under the Udula Tree by Chinelo Okparanta. Now, this is one of my challenge books. It was one of the ones that I pulled from my challenge cup, and it was actually one of the ones I was more excited for, hence why I physically own it. It is a book that my parents gifted me for Christmas last year. It is a book set in, I want to say, Nigeria. Yes, correct, in Nigeria. And we are following a young queer woman who is struggling both with sexuality as well as living in a time of civil unrest. There is some war that happens during her youth. Now, this is a book where I definitely can see the value and the importance of it. I get why it has an award. I get why it's well known and well respected. I was just left feeling bored by the story. I am not someone who picks up literary fiction very often, which is what I would consider this. When it comes to literary fiction, I either love it and it ends up being one of my top reads of the year, such as like The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi, or I'm left just overly bored, uninterested, and quickly DNF the book when I realize it's just not going to be a hit for me. And unfortunately, that was the case with this book. I would never discourage anyone from reading it. I really think that it's just a personal taste where I found myself uninterested in the story and in the characters. When I try to think back of like what has happened in this book, like most literary fiction books, nothing has really happened. It's very character driven. And when you're just not that interested in the character, what's the point of continuing the story? So after weeks and weeks of telling myself I need to pick this book up again and continue making progress and dreading it, I was just like, you know what? It is time to DNF it. It is just not for me. The next two books I DNF'd were both audiobooks. The first one was called Shudder, and this one is written by an Indigenous author. So I picked this one up specifically because I was taking part in the TBR battle that Expedition Through Pages does, and we needed like a mystery crime fiction story. Mystery and crime fiction is not a genre that I really like. This was one of the few ones that was on my TBR and also available through my library. And the fact that it was written by an Indigenous author, I was like, great, this should work out fabulously. Multiple goals being met with this story, and oh my gosh, I did get 33% through this story. I don't think it's very long though. It was maybe like 8 or 9 hours long. Boy, was I bored out of my mind. Like I said, crime fiction and even mysteries are not really my thing. I'm more a thriller horror girly where I like it to be a little bit more fast paced. Probably the fact that I don't like literary fiction. Again, you're probably like, okay, you like a little bit more happening in your stories. This story follows a woman who is able to see ghosts, and she is a crime scene photographer. And so essentially she goes to crime scenes and photographs the whole scene so that they can look through those for evidence, even once the crime scene is cleaned up. Now, part of me thought this would be really interesting. I mean, we have someone who is dealing with crimes and mysteries, and they have the ability to speak to the people who are the victims of these crimes, but that's not really what was happening in this book. Our character very much was like ignoring her abilities, and it almost made me be like, well, why are you in this field? Like, why are you doing this? Her ability to see ghosts was just like something to make the story a little bit more unique, but at the same time didn't add anything to the story. We would spend some time in the present, and then we would also like flash back to her life as a young child where she was starting to learn about her ability to see ghosts and kind of how to handle that situation. Neither timeline was very interesting to me. 33% into the story, and I still felt like nothing had really happened, and I just decided that it was not my kind of book. Final book I DNF'd was Thirsty. I DNF'd this book at 12%. I picked this book up because I was trying to increase the number of Black authors that I was reading. I was a little bit behind on that goal of reading 20 Black authors. Of course, I am behind on every goal. because I'm not reading as much this year. But this book I decided to pick up because my library had it as an audiobook available right away. It kind of has a mystery aspect to it, but it is set at the beginning of school, kind of the end of summer. So I thought maybe it would be a good transition book since we're going from summer into fall. However, I really should have known that this book wouldn't be for me because it has a couple of characteristics or tropes or aspects to it that I usually don't like. Essentially, we are following a young woman who is wanting to join this very exclusive sorority, and I believe we're kind of gonna be following her as she does not so great things to gain favor with them. She is also struggling with a drinking problem, and sororities, secret societies, and even college campuses in general are not something that interests me very much. I think I started to realize that a little bit when I was reading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, where the secret societies and everything was my least favorite part, and I enjoyed the second book a lot more because we spent less time with the secret societies and less time on the college campus. So the whole sorority aspect, just even though it wasn't a big part of what I'd read so far, knowing that it would probably play a bigger role kind of turned me off. On top of that, I feel a little bad saying this, but I have no patience for drunks. I have never liked or really tolerated drunk behavior, no matter if it is like just a fun, silly, goofy, I'm drunk, woohoo time, or if it is like our character who is clearly dealing with an alcohol problem. I am very much turned off by that behavior, and so it's really difficult for me to read a character who acts that way. So I just in the first chapter was very turned off by our character, and I wanted to give her a little bit more time, hence why I read or listened to a few more chapters of it, but nothing really changed, and I decided once again that it was not the book for me. All right, getting into the books that I have actually read and finished, starting with our lowest rated, our 3.5 star of the month, we have The Wicked Bargain by Gabe Cole-Nova. This is an author I have read before. I read their book Most Ardently, which was a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and I had a pretty good time with that, so I was eager to go ahead and pick up another book by them. This book unfortunately left me a little bit disappointed. In this book, we are following a young non-binary character who is a pirate. And at the beginning of this story, they lose their father and their crew because their father had made a deal with El Diablo for 16 years of prosperity, and those 16 years have come to an end. This is a young adult story. Our character is 16 years old themselves, and they end up getting rescued by another crew of pirates. And they just kind of start to live their life with this new crew, as well as trying to figure out how to get their father's soul back. Because El Diablo actually comes to them and says, you can save your father by giving me your soul in return. And that's not a deal they're willing to make, but they're hoping that there is another way to save their father without giving up their own soul. Couple of things I will say that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the pirate aspect of the story. I've always been like, do I like pirates in books? I'm not really sure. And this book, I thought it was a lot of fun, that the author did a good job of building these pirates in a realistic light. They definitely were flawed because they are pirates, but at the same time, these pirates were focusing a lot on bringing resources to these communities that were fighting the Spanish Empire that was trying to colonize them. So this book did have topics of colonization, especially within the Caribbean, and so I did really enjoy that aspect of the story. Our character, for the most part, I did enjoy them. One thing that I thought was a little odd was that they identified more as a boy, but also preferred they them pronouns, but they never let anyone know on the new crew that they them was their preferred pronouns, because they did not want to like bring attention to themselves, and so they just focused on making sure that they saw them as a boy. I kind of thought that eventually we would get to the point where the character would feel comfortable revealing that aspect of themselves, but they never did. Like, they never even told their love interest that they preferred these pronouns. And so I was kind of like, that's a little bit weird. I feel like once you feel comfortable and you start to see yourself as potentially being romantically involved with someone, that you would want them to know this part of you. So that was something about the story that I thought was a little bit odd. Obviously, it is their personal decision when they do come out as non-binary, but I just thought, especially since this is a standalone, that it was weird that they never did it within this story. I did for a while think that there would be a second book and was really excited for the second book, but then I realized the second book was actually a companion novel, and that left me a little bit disappointed because I thought pacing wise, this book was pretty slow for a good part of it, but then towards the end, things really started to build, relationships really started to get fleshed out. Our character has these magical abilities of controlling fire and ice, and they've always been reluctant to use that because, you know, obviously people would think that they themselves potentially were a demon and would throw them in jail or even kill them. And towards the end of the story, they started to grow more confident in their magical abilities and see how they could use them for good and all this. And so I was looking forward to reading a second book with this character now that they've gained all this self-confidence and are starting a romance and everything. And then realizing that no, it just kind of all ends in this book made it seem like this book was just incomplete. My issue with the pacing is we essentially have our character, he ends up on this new ship with this new crew. Diablo comes to them and is like, hey, in a couple of moon cycles, I will come back for your answer on if you want to save your father or not. And then there are so many time jumps where a character's like, a few days passed, a couple weeks passed, and they're not doing anything. I'm like, you have this little time frame to figure out how to save your father, and you're just dittering around, not really doing anything. And it just left me a little bit frustrated. And then towards the end, they're like, well, tomorrow's the day where I gotta figure out if I want to save my dad or not. Guess I better figure out how to do that. I was like, you got like less than 48 hours and now you're finally gonna sit down and try and figure out how to take down like the devil? So pacing wise, it definitely had its issues. However, the world and the characters did pull the story through for me. I could definitely see myself reading more from this author. I'll probably check out the companion novel at some point as well, but I think the story definitely had its issues and did leave me a little bit more disappointed than impressed. Up next, I had 2 4-star reads. The first one was Star-Crossed by Ali Theron. This is the second book to Spellbound, I believe was the first one. And this is kind of like a historical fantasy mystery series. In this book, we are following Rory, who has the ability to touch objects and see their past. Like, he's pulled into the past of this object, which is really helpful when it comes to solving mysteries, but can also be very dangerous because he can get trapped in the past if he doesn't have a way to get out. And on the other hand, we are also following his now partner, Arthur, who is not magical in any way. However, he works with a lot of people who do have magical abilities, and he just makes sure that they are safe, that they have everything that they need, they can stay hidden. And also there are a lot of dangerous magical artifacts that he uses his resources, because he's a very wealthy man, to track and make sure that they are safely handled and stored and everything like that. And in the first book, these two cross paths because of a very dangerous artifact that is being brought to New York. And throughout the first book, we watch a bit of a relationship between them start to form, and we get to see that relationship continue in the second book. I would say for me, their relationship is my absolute favorite part of the story. I just think they're so cute together. I mean, obviously, they're two very different people from two very different lives. Rory grew up very poor. He was the child of a immigrant whose father was not in the picture. He was actually born out of wedlock. So their life together was definitely very difficult. He also has a very difficult past with the church after they got their hands on him when he was very young, because his father was actually a member of the church. And then on top of that, he is still living a life of poverty and obviously in a relationship with one of the wealthiest people in New York. So that kind of difference in finances has definitely been a sticking point in their relationship, where Rory very much does not want to take anything from Arthur, and Arthur is like, listen, I'm really trying to respect the fact that you don't want me to like lavish you with gifts or anything, but you live in an apartment that's infested with rats and roaches, and as someone who loves you, I'm literally begging you to just like, let me give you a jacket, let me buy you a jacket, let me buy you a hat, something, anything. And so Rory has been really stubborn about that, but just like watching him grow more and more comfortable in his place at Arthur's side has definitely been just wonderful. And Rory just loves to give stuff to Arthur. Like, he wants to like cook him meals, and he just makes so many sacrifices for Arthur so that they can be together in a world where two men can't be together. And yet him not allowing Arthur to make the same sacrifices is a little frustrating, but you know, my boy is growing. On top of that, the mystery continues. We have a lot of players who are coming into this mystery. I feel like I was a little bit lost because I waited a little too long between book 1 and book 2. So I kept being like, I don't remember who you are, and I don't remember what you guys are referencing. I also felt like this book was giving a little bit of middle book syndrome, where it was very clear that we were setting up for what is going to be happening in the next book, rather than this book really having its own solid plot. So that's why this only got 4 stars, while the first book got 5 stars. But I'm continuing to absolutely love the characters, the side characters, all the magical world building that we are getting, and I'm interested for sure to see what happens in the third and I believe a final book. The second 4-star, and actually the last book I read this month, was my single audio book, and that is When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. And this is a horror story that is set on a southern plantation. We are following this woman who grew up in a very poor town, and one that I would say definitely was rather segregated. And as soon as she could, she moved away from this town. She had some experiences in this town involving this plantation that is said to be haunted, that made her want to get the hell out of there. And throughout the story, we are both getting flashbacks to her youth in this town and her experience with this plantation, as well as the present day, where she is returning to this town to go to the wedding of a friend of hers. They were friends throughout their youth. However, they kind of went different ways as they got older, but she decides that she owes it to this friend to go to the wedding, despite the fact that this wedding is being held on the plantation. So someone has purchased the plantation, remodeled it, and they are now opening it up for weddings. And our character obviously feels that this is completely inappropriate, especially since this plantation has a lot of demonstrations, and all of their staff is Black. And so they have all these Black people working out in the fields as a demonstration, or washing clothes, or serving people foods and drinks and things like that. And the only people that are really visiting it are white people who are just like having such a grand old time watching life on a plantation, and everything just doesn't quite feel right. This book, I think, had a lot of strong aspects to it. If you are looking for a book that has an underlying level of discomfort throughout the whole story, I think that this book definitely provides that. If you're looking for a book that really displays the horrors of slavery, there are flashbacks to what the slaves on this plantation experienced, and it is very horroring to read. It's something that's going to make you feel a little queasy. It's going to make you feel very uncomfortable. And the writing was so beautiful. I really think that the writing of this story elevated it, because it was just stunning. I absolutely loved the writing. And also, this is definitely a book I would recommend as an audiobook. I love this narrator. I think the narrator did an amazing job and just really elevated the whole experience. The one thing I will say, while there was definitely some good horror elements, if you go into the story hoping for like a good revenge plotline, which is honestly kind of what I was hoping for, I think you're going to be left a little bit disappointed. I think that the author really went as far as you can go when it comes to expressing the horrors of slavery, but when it came to the horrors of the revenge inflicted on the white people who are the descendants of the slavers, I think that she held back a little bit. I was left very underwhelmed. I kind of was a little confused why I felt like our main character went through more trauma, living through these not quite reenactments, but really being thrown back into time to watch what her ancestors went through compared to what the white people went through. Yeah, some of them died, but I feel like what she went through was so much more terrifying than anything that they experienced. And I was kind of hoping for like a full-blown slaughter kind of situation, which, you should always say violence isn't the answer, but sometimes you just gotta let some angry spirits get it out of their system a little bit. So yes, I did only rate this 4 stars, mostly because I was left very underwhelmed by the revenge aspect of the story, but everything else about the story was a 10 out of 10 experience. All right, up next, we had 2 4.5 star ratings this month. The first was Blackbird Blue Road by Sophia Pasternak, and this was the challenge book that I pulled for this month. So look at me actually reading one of my challenge books. Was it a middle grade book? Yes. This book was for the category of disability representation. We are following a young Jewish girl and her brother has been dying of leprosy for a few years. At the start of this book, it is very clear that he is coming to the end of his battle against this disease, and he is losing. I would say that they're probably around 12, 13 years old. They are very young, and our girl finds out that their uncle is going to come at the New Year's holiday. I don't remember exactly what the holiday is called because it's a Jewish holiday. Rosh Hashanah. That is when he is going to come, and he is going to take her brother to one of the colonies where they have been putting a lot of sick people to kind of segregate them from the healthy people. And she's like, absolutely not. We are not going to do that. And so she takes him, steals him away into the night in hopes of taking him to this city where there is a lot of medical advancement being made. However, along the way, way, they stumble across another boy who actually ends up being half demon, and because they save him along the way, he offers to take them to a city where no one dies. And so essentially they're hoping to go to the city where literally death cannot enter, and so her brother will not die, and that will give them more time to find a cure. And we are just kind of following them along this journey. And I went into this book being like, it's a middle grade book. It's going to be full of heart and fight and sibling love and everything's going to be fine. This book had me bawling my eyes out. I was like, oh, you know, we are following a girl who loves her brother so much. He has been the center of her universe for a long time, especially since he became sick. A lot of their family abandoned him, and so she refuses to do so and continues to care for him during his illness. And for a 12-year-old, the things that she has to do for her sick brother are not great. You know, he's suffering from leprosy, which does include the loss of limbs, so she has to like cut his fingers and toes off when they become too rotten, which honestly I don't know if I could do that. Even though he doesn't feel anything, it's just like what? No, I don't think I could do that. But she is such a strong and determined young woman. She wants to go into law when she is older, and she's just a young girl that I definitely could see other young girls reading and really looking up to. But she is very much in denial about the fact that her brother is dying of a disease that does not have a cure, and this causes a lot of strife between her and the people in her community and even within her family. And it's really hard to kind of watch her throughout this story, even as they are getting closer and closer to a potential solution, realize that her brother just might not make it, and having to like grapple with the reality of spending the rest of her life living without this person that she loves so much. And watching him die is very difficult. He's a very intelligent young man. That's one of the reasons she has so much hope that he'll make it, because she's like, no, he's a genius. Like, he's really good at math and really good at science. He's going to be a doctor someday. And so of course he's going to come up with a cure. And you can see this brilliant mind in this really restricted and dying body. And it is just such a difficult book to read, and like the ending was really beautiful. I'm not going to tell you obviously if they save him or not once they reach this city, but honestly the way that the author ended the story just was absolutely perfect. I'm not sure why I didn't give it a full 5 stars, probably because it is a middle grade story, so it's not really for me. So there was probably like a few things here and there with like the way that the characters acted, or even like the pacing, that didn't quite bump it up to a 5 star. But if you are looking for a middle grade story, especially one that deals with difficult topics, specifically illness and disability, but also has very strong young characters in it, then I would definitely recommend this. I feel like I was like almost like starting to tear up just like talking about that book. But on the other hand, a very different vibe, but also a 4.5, we have Red Air by Lisa Henry and Sarah Honey. This was not on my TBR this month. This was one I just spontaneously picked up because I was worried that I was sliding into a bit of a slump. I was reading a couple of books and just kind of struggling to pick them up. And so I was like, I need something that I can just like binge, that I could just jump into, have a good time. And this book has been at the top of my mind for a long time, so I finally picked it up. It is a queer, fun fantasy romance. We have a man named Loth, I believe is his name. Yes, such a weird name. Loth, Loth. Anyway, he is a pickpocket and he ends up getting captured and thrown into prison, and he has a cellmate soulmate, who is this grubby young man who has red hair. And our character is not a natural redhead, but he does have henna in his hair, so he looks like a redhead right now. And he spends his time in that cell teasing this grubby little man who is hiding in a pile of hay. And then all of a sudden, someone breaks into their prison and is like, I am here to rescue the lost prince, and I'm here for the redhead. And our character is like, yep, that's me. I am the lost prince. Look at my red hair. I am here in prison, ready to be rescued. And the grubby little man who's hiding in the haystack pops out and goes, no, I'm the prince. I have red hair. Look at my hair. It's red. And so the rescuers are like, okay, we don't know what the prince looks like, so we're just going to take both of you. And so they take them both and start their journey to their benefactor to hopefully return the lost prince to the throne so that his evil uncle, who's currently on the throne, can stop being the ruler. And obviously, as they are traveling, they come across a lot of shenanigans, and our two characters end up falling in love. I had so much fun with the story. It was exactly what I wanted, what I needed, what I expected from the story. I was laughing out loud so often, and I just adored the characters and their relationship. Loth definitely loved teasing Grub. In fact, Grub is not his name. He just calls him Grub because he was so grubby when they first met. And Grub eventually starts to like return the banter and to have a lot of fun with Loth and to kind of like develop a crush on him and want to be with him. And Loth, despite his resistance to forming any attachment to this young man, starts to develop his own feelings as well. So the only reason it didn't get a 5-star is I did think it had a little bit of a pacing issue kind of in the second half of the story. I really enjoyed the ending, but there was some time before that where I felt it was a little bit on the meandery side. And I also was hoping that there would be a little bit more smut in it. There was only one explicit scene and the rest were all fade to black. So if you are someone who doesn't like too much smut in their book, then this is probably up your alley, since there was only that one semi-smutty scene in it. But other than that, I had a lot of fun and super glad that I finally got to this. All right, the final book and the only 5-star this month is a sequel to another 5-star read, and that is Celestial Monsters. I feel like I said that weird. Celestial Monsters by Aiden Thomas. And this is the sequel to the Sunbearer Trials, which I think I read just the month before after finishing that book and giving it 5 stars. I was so eager to jump into the next book, and luckily my TBR allowed me to do so. This follows Tio, and he is the son of a jade goddess, specifically the goddess of birds, hence why he has these stunning wings. And he lives in a world where there are humans, there are jade gods such as his mother, and there are gold gods. And it is definitely a there's definitely a hierarchy to the society, with the golds at the top, then the jades, and then the humans. And Tio has always kind of had a problem with this, specifically because he feels like the golds, despite the fact that they act as heroes and make sure to save humans and jades alike when disaster strikes, they separate themselves from the rest of them very much, while the jade gods tend to mingle with their human worshippers a little bit more, and he's kind of tired of being looked down on. And he has a big problem with the Sunbearer trials, which are trials that are held every 10 years 10 contestants, 10 children of gods are selected by Sol, the sun god, to compete in these trials. And whoever wins the trials becomes the sun bearer for the next 10 years, a very coveted position. And the loser ends up becoming a sacrifice, because there needs to be a sacrifice to replenish the soul stones, because they act as a prison to the obsidian gods, which caused a lot of chaos in the old days and wanted to pretty much subjugate humans. So the first book follows Tio as he is surprisingly brought into the trials. Usually it is only the children of gold gods who are selected, since they are the heroes. However, that year Tio, as well as Sio, a young 13-year-old jade, son of god of bad luck, bad luck indeed, are selected for the trials. And the second book ends up kind of following what happens after the outcome of the trials. Obviously, I can't tell you too much about this because I don't want to tell you how the first book ends or really give you any hints as to that. But I will say that in this book, we get 2 points of view. We get Tio's as well as Sio, who is that other second jade who plays a big role in the first book. And they have kind of gone their separate ways. They have 2 different goals that they are trying to achieve, and so we are watching them as they are going on their separate journeys and converging again towards the end of this story. I will say that's the one thing I didn't like as much during this book, because I loved seeing Tio and Sio together in the first book and seeing them separate. So for the majority of this book had me going like, no, I want to see my 2 little jades together, because Tio really took on like that big brother role for Sio, and it was just such a cute relationship. However, we did get to watch Tio develop a bit of a romance with a old friend of his, kind of friend turned enemy, nemesis turned lover kind of situation in the story. We continue to expand this world. I absolutely love this world and all the gods and magic and just the environment and the different cities that they visit. So that was a lot of fun. And we obviously get to continue to see Tio with his friend Naya. What is her name? Yeah, it is Naya. Whoa, look at me remembering names. So he and Naya continue to have a wonderful friendship throughout this. This story also focuses a lot more on criticizing current power structures and kind of questioning them and seeing how we can rebuild them for the better. So there was a lot of good stuff going on in the story. For the most part, I just love the world and I love the characters, and the ending was just so sweet and had me smiling and kicking my feet. And so this is just a world and series that I have absolutely fallen in love with this year. All right, guys, so those are all the books that I read this month. Let me know your favorite and least favorite of the month. Favorite obviously was Celestial Monsters, and least favorite, despite the fact that I didn't dislike it or anything, was The Wicked Bargain by Gabe Cole Nova. So we have 2 books by Hispanic authors featuring trans main characters here on both sides of the spectrum, but overall a decent reading month. I complained a little bit at the beginning, but it wasn't too bad. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!